version of the Rotary District 50/50 Club Training Fiesta. Last year, we decided to rename the former District Training Assembly to the Club Training event, as it's not about district training, it's about club training. We traditionally have held this in person at Kwantlen University facility in Surrey for the past number of years. And while we miss seeing you all in person, we are holding this virtually with you safely in your homes and hopefully not in your pajamas. I'm so proud of the amazing service and projects that have been accomplished throughout our district in the past year, that we have lived through this pandemic. You continue to provide funds to those in need. You continue to volunteer to deliver groceries and prescriptions to vulnerable people. You continue to provide much needed medical supplies, and some of you continue to be on the front lines, risking your own lives to save others. Yes, you Rotarians of District 50/50 are amazing. We also all have to remember that the two halves of our district are in very different places at this moment with respect to vaccine access and distribution. One day, hopefully by early fall, our borders will be open and we will be a reunited District 50/50. We thank our training team, including the technical assistants, for putting this fiesta together for us. We hope that you'll enjoy the offerings over the coming weeks. Please let us know if you have any ideas of how we can serve you better as you continue to serve our clubs and communities. Rotary truly opens opportunities. Thank you for joining with us. Enjoy, and please stay safe. Over to you, Governor-elect Bev.
Hi, I am Bev Harrington, and I am proudly a Rotarian for life. I am honored and excited for the opportunity to serve you as your incoming district governor in July. Here we are for a second year, conducting club training on Zoom. I so miss being physically together at Kwantlen University in Surrey. The casual conversations, the hugs, eating lunch together, and those beautiful tulips that the Lacana Rotary brings each year. Only because of the can-do attitude of so many of you, club meetings have gone on, as well as training, because you have provided tech support on a totally new platform without skipping a beat. You quickly learned how to navigate Zoom and breakout rooms and sharing screens. The rest of us, like me, well, we just needed to figure out how to unmute. If you are one of those folks who helped us stay connected, I am very appreciative. This year, training is a fiesta of choices, geared to individual club roles such as foundation chair, club secretary, fundraising, and so much more, including a president's-elect session to approve the 2021-2022 district budget on April 22nd. We may find ourselves, hopefully soon, facing another challenge as great as last year's sudden shift to Zoom, holding club meetings in person and on Zoom at the same time. Please know that your district leadership team is here to help you. Be sure to sign up for Mitty Chang's session on hosting hybrid club meetings on Tuesday, April 27th. And let us know how we can continue to serve you as you serve your club. Our incoming Rotary International President, Shekhar Mehta, is a self-proclaimed dreamer. He says, if you can dream it, you can do it. He reminded me of a quote that truly changed the trajectory of my career and life over 40 years ago. It has encouraged me to take bold steps many times since. Here's how it goes. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. As you continue on your leadership journey, I encourage each of you to be fully committed, to dream big, to be bold, to confidently serve to change lives, because Rotary connects change makers. So please stay well, stay safe, and stay connected.
Well, thank you very much, District Governor Carroll and District Governor-elect Bev. As you heard, there's a number of things coming up as we move through these training sessions. But just before we get to Kent and his presentation on leadership, let's have a quick conversation about the whole point of learning and development. Why are we here tonight? Why are we putting on, as a district, the Club Training Fiesta this month to help Rotarians? And here is the statement that will give you some background and some thought about why we do all of this. And that is that we're actually trying to make Rotarians more sticky. And by that, I mean they stick to their clubs better. We have, as you know, as Rotary, a tremendous flow of people that come in our front door every year and a tremendous flow that leave via the back. And if we can do anything to make them more informed in a learning development way to help them grow professionally and personally, we believe that that will indeed help them stay with our clubs and make sure that we are keeping them in the fold. So to do that, we have focused our training in a number of areas. There's a new Rotary Action Plan, which is really in effect and will be over the next 4 years. And it really should be guiding us in the way that we think about our Rotary clubs and the way we work. And within that, our Training Fiesta will link to the 4 strategic imperatives, the 4 important areas within that action plan. And they are these. And as you can see, as leaders of your club, you're being encouraged to buy into this plan, to use these priorities as a roadmap to help your club excel and continue to grow and thrive. So the leaders for this year, these are the things we're looking at, and now through 2024. And within each of those 4 areas, there are some specifics that we'd like you to look at. There's a lot we can do at the club level. That is the foundational piece for Rotary. We are Rotary clubs first, and then we are Rotary districts and move on to zones and Rotary International. But we're hopeful that each club can have a greater sense of focus in trying, instead of trying to do everything and be all things to all people, and only getting partway there on a lot of those things, focus your efforts. Think about your club's strategic action plan and how you can challenge your club to increase their impact in these particular areas. As well, we're going to ask you to get your participants engaged. As District Governor-elect Bev mentioned, we've had to move quickly to online format. We will soon be faced with the challenge of how do we now shift from an online format back to in-person and/or hybrid meetings. So we have to make sure that we're engaging our members, whether they're in person at our meetings or joining us through Zoom as you are tonight. So let's create a space where our members, our communities, those we help, can give us feedback to get us where we need to be. And in doing that, we can build better connections. And we're going to encourage you also to use Rotary's Learning Center to help develop your leadership and other skills. And as each of you signs up for a session during our Training Fiesta, you will receive a document afterwards, which gives you some ideas about training courses that you can get through the Learning Center to help increase your and your club's learning capability. We're looking to help clubs expand, to get better reach within their communities around the world, and to utilize the many resources that are available to them through Rotary. There's all kinds of ways to get your message out, and through our Training Fiesta, you will hear some of those. Gwen Jones will be talking about the use of social media. We have our zone public image resource person that's coming to us from Detroit. Michelangelo Caruso will be joining us, and he'll give us some thoughts on how we can engage members in our meetings as well. So lots of opportunities here to tell compelling stories about Rotary. And Also, we want to challenge your clubs to increase their ability to adapt. All of our clubs have shown tremendous ability to adapt during the past year. We recognize that that can be a stepping stone to help us further adapt and innovate, to find new ways of expressing Rotary, to find new ways of reaching our community, and to find new ways of making this a continuity session as opposed to one and done. So getting together with your President's Council, your past president, president-elect, and president nominee to help chart a path for the club that they can guide you through. So these are the administrative things that can happen in a club that will increase our ability to adapt to any circumstance, whether it be COVID or another. Just before I introduce Dr. Kent Keith, I was remiss in not mentioning that this session is being recorded. And so if you're concerned about that and would like to shut off your video, please feel free to do so. But it is being recorded and will be posted to our Rotary District 5050 website. If you want any of your club to view the session, they can do so. That'll be up next week. I also am remiss because Jerry Hall, the past Rotary International Director from Reno, Nevada, has also joined us, and I'd like to recognize Jerry. Thank you very much, Jerry, for joining us on this call this evening. And he and Kent are working on some leadership initiatives. So thank you for your continued leadership in Rotary. So our keynote speaker. As you heard Gary Hollick mention, Kent spoke at a Rotary Zone conference in Hawaii in 2004, which is where I first heard him. From there, he came to British Columbia in 2007 and joined us at Harrison, where he gave a keynote presentation and also did a workshop on leadership. He speaks particularly about servant leadership and about how we can be servants as we lead. He also ties leadership into the four-way test. Kent is perhaps best known for having penned the Paradoxical Commandments, which you can find on his website, kentmkeith.com, which are a guiding principle of 10 commandments that state something that's perhaps negative and then give us a positive counteraction to that. For instance, people are irrational and unreasonable. Love them anyway. So I encourage you to look up Kent's Paradoxical Commandments. They are worth reading and worth looking at. And with that, I would like to ask Kent to please take over. And thank you, Kent. We'll look forward to your presentation.
Thanks very much, Rod. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you all this evening. Let me go get my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right, terrific. Thanks very much. So this evening I'd like to talk about Rotary and servant leadership, two things that are both very important to me. You all know the motto of service above self. It's a long-standing Rotary motto. It's something that attracted me to Rotary many years ago and many of my fellow Rotarians. That commitment to service has changed the world, both locally and internationally. We see Rotary leadership as being about serving others, and we want to serve others in effective ways. So I'm excited about the fact that there's a body of practice and research that can guide us in implementing service above self in an effective way, and that is servant leadership. Servant leadership is a field that's a rich resource for Rotarians as they lead their clubs and the Rotary movement itself. It's diverse, it's international. There are principles and practices, there's empirical research, there are real life examples of servant leadership, and these are all things that we can learn from. What we learn can help us not only as Rotarians, but as family members, as colleagues at work, and as members of our community. So tonight I'd like to give you an introduction to this field. I'm sure some of you know quite a bit already, and I look forward to your comments and participation. I thought tonight we could look at the modern servant leadership movement, and then this issue of the different focus, the different motivation, including the four-way test. That'll take us about halfway through, at which point I'd like to stop for a couple of minutes and see if you have comments or questions that we could pick up at that point. If not, that's fine, but that'll be an opportunity. And then moving ahead to the second half, servant leadership in the workplace, the key practices of servant leaders, and then a few ideas about club leadership. Hopefully at the end, we'll have time for comments, questions, and discussion. So that's the agenda. I'd like to start with the modern servant leadership movement. You know, the idea of servant leadership goes back thousands of years, but we know there's a modern servant leadership movement. We know when it started and who started it. It was launched in the United States in 1970 by Robert K. Greenleaf, who actually coined the word servant leader and servant leadership. The idea had been around for a long time, but he was the first one that we know of that used those words. Greenleaf was born and raised in Indiana. He was born in 1904, lived in 1990. He grew up in a time when corporations were growing in importance. This is something that, you know, it's hard for us to remember, I think, which is that big institutions were not always of great importance in the United States, not until really the 20th century. And they began to grow up as Greenleaf himself was growing up. He was influenced by a college professor who said, you know, if you want to bring about change in these institutions, you need to do it from the inside. So, you know, join a big corporation and work from the inside to bring about change. So he took that advice and he joined AT&T and worked there from 1926 until 1964. It was a good choice because at the time AT&T was either the largest or one of the largest corporations in the world. They had a million employees. So he was really interested in teaching and training and personnel assessment. And so as he rose through the ranks at AT&T, he ended up as AT&T's Director of Management Research, which was a really interesting job. And basically his job was to train and educate the senior leaders and managers of this huge corporation to be as effective as possible. I've got a little video clip I'd like to show you here about Greenleaf.
Robert Greenleaf knew that leadership can make a difference in our organizations and our society. Greenleaf worked for AT&T, where he was the Director of Management Research. It was his job to educate and train the leaders and managers of AT&T to be as effective as possible. He concluded after 38 years of experience that the most effective leaders and managers were those who were not focused on their own power and wealth, but rather were focused on serving their colleagues and customers. In 1970, Greenleaf launched the modern servant leadership movement with his classic essay, The Servant as Leader. It was in that essay that he coined the words servant leader and servant leadership.
So during his time at AT&T, Greenleaf noticed that some leaders were focused on acquiring power and wealth for themselves, and some were focused on serving others, their colleagues and customers. And his conclusion after 38 years was that the most effective leaders were those that were focused on serving others. He said that servant leadership starts with a desire to serve, not the desire to lead. So in a sense, it starts with a commitment to service above self, the Rotary motto. And we know that there are many ways to serve, and each way has its own dignity and its own meaning. So leading is only one way to serve. But when a person with a desire to serve sees the opportunity to serve by leading, then that person accepts leadership responsibility and becomes a servant leader. Greenleaf launched the modern servant leadership movement with his classic essay, The Servant as Leader, first published in 1970, republished in 1973. The essay has been read by hundreds of thousands of people since then. It still guides the international servant leadership movement. It's read in dozens and dozens of college leadership courses and corporations and so on. In 1977, Greenleaf published a collection of essays and speeches, which still ranks high on Amazon.com, the list of most purchased books, even higher on the list of leadership books. So people are still reading Greenleaf. He's still quite relevant. So here's his definition of the servant leader in that classic essay. He said the servant leader is servant first. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first. And when I see this, of course, I think of my fellow Rotarians. So you start with that desire to serve, but then conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead, because that's a way to serve. He says that person is sharply different from one who is leader first, perhaps because of the need to assuage an unusual power drive or to acquire material possessions. The difference between the servant first and the leader first manifests itself in the care taken by the servant first to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served. So this is about paying attention. This is about paying attention to other people and what they need. Organizations work in different sectors, they provide different products and services, but Greenleaf believed that the most fundamental business of every type of organization is to grow its people. That was a major theme of his work. I look at it as a triple win. When people grow, they benefit personally from their growth, and the capacity of the organization grows because it consists of people. And when the capacity of the organization grows, it can do things better or do things it was never able to do before. So the individuals benefit, the organization benefits, and those served also benefit. So it's not a surprise that when Greenleaf set up the test of how well a servant leader is doing, he came up with this one. Do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? So again, a focus on growing people. If people are growing, then you're doing well as a servant leader. Finally, what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? This is something we should be taking into account when we make our decisions. So what was the goal? Well, Greenleaf wanted organizations to become servant institutions that would truly serve their employees, customers, business partners, creditors, members, shareholders, communities, and society as a whole, including the least privileged. As a result, the quality of our lives will improve and the world will become a better place for everyone. He focused on institutions because, again, they were growing in importance and more services were being provided, not person to person, but by mediating institutions. So there are a whole lot of ideas about leadership. And so I thought, I'd take a look at some of the scholarship on leadership and see what scholars think are unique features of servant leadership compared with other theories. And I came up with 4 things that I think are pretty unique about servant leadership. The first is the moral component. This is about treating people right. It's about creating a moral environment in which people can raise moral issues. And the surprising thing here is that many leadership theories have no moral component. It's about techniques and skills that you can use to get people to do things, and they can be used for good or for ill. It doesn't matter in terms of the theory. For servant leaders, it matters. There's a strong moral component. Second is a focus on serving followers for their own good, not just the good of the organization, encouraging the growth so that people can reach their fullest potential. There are leadership theories that would allow or encourage the leader to exploit employees or followers for the good of the organization. Servant leaders try to grow people, not exploit people. Third, the servant leader has a concern with the success of all stakeholders broadly defined, everybody that's touched by the organization, employees, customers, business partners, communities, society as a whole, including those who are the least privileged. All of them count. All of them should be taken into account. And finally, self-reflection as a counter to the leader's hubris, arrogance, or pride. And that results in humility. And that can happen because the leader knows it's not about the leader. It's about identifying and meeting the needs of others. So those are 4 things that I found in the literature that I think are unique about servant leadership. I also think it's special that servant leaders get 2 kinds of results. Of course, they obtain the resources to continue and, if possible, expand the work of the organization. That could be a profit or a surplus. So this is an organizational need. All organizations need resources. But servant leaders also serve their colleagues and customers and make the world a better place. So this is the organization's purpose. And this is a second result. Servant leaders can exercise power, but when they do, they exercise power with others, not over others, and they exercise power on behalf of others, not for their own personal benefit. They see power as only a means, not an end. It's only a tool, and it's usually not the most important tool. If a servant leader finds herself or himself at the point where they've got to exercise raw power, they usually stop and say, I think we've lost something along the way here. I need to go back. We need to talk again about the mission, our alignment, our relationships, just what are we doing? Because power is usually a tool of last resort only. So what is servant leadership not? Well, it's not soft. The servant leader can make hard decisions whenever necessary in order to serve others. They confront people who cannot or will not perform. They confront people who are not able to behave correctly. They work with them. They give them opportunities. But if people cannot perform, then they need to find happiness elsewhere. It's also not about a single style of leading. A style of leading is about the leader. The leader has this style. Well, sometimes that's an appropriate style, sometimes it's not. So servant leadership is not about a single style. A servant leader uses whatever style is needed to effectively address each person or situation. So to take a couple of obvious examples, if the ship is sinking, the captain can serve others best by ordering people into the lifeboats. The servant leader will listen, make sure he or she is getting correct information so the orders are the right orders. But it's an authoritarian style. It needs to be. That's how the servant leader will serve in that situation. But if the servant leader is working with volunteers, say on a community project, extensive listening and consultation may be the best way to serve. I mean, these are people who can get up and go home if they don't like the way things are going. So you don't order people around. Situations are different. Servant leaders also adjust their leadership behavior to meet the needs of the people they are leading. And people are in different places in their lives, different places in terms of their experience and their development. And so servant leaders make sure that they connect with them where they're at. We know that some people need more direction, some need less, some need more encouragement, some need less, some need more coaching, some need less, some need more freedom, some need less, and so on. Connect with them where they're at. Different focus, different motivation. I see two models of leadership in the world. I call them models. They're frames of mind or paradigms or approaches. The dominant model is the power model of leadership, and that's about acquiring and wielding personal power. It's often about using people. The other model I see is the servant model, a service model of leadership, which is about making a difference in the lives of others. It really is about serving people, not using people. And Rotarians, of course, live the service model of leadership. Rotarians don't ask, how can I get power? How can I make people do things? Rotarians ask, what do people need? How can I help them to get it? So rather than embarking on a quest for power, the Rotary leader embarks on a quest to identify and meet the needs of others. And that is exactly the mission of a servant leader. Servant leaders identify and meet the needs of their colleagues so they can perform at their highest levels. Do they have the training, the resources, the opportunity, the time, et cetera, to perform at their best? Servant leaders identify and meet the needs of their customers, by which I mean anyone the organization serves, customer, client, patient, member, student, citizen, so that their customers will be truly served. Are we really listening? Do we know what they need? Are we really providing it? Servant leaders can be anybody, really. Of course, Rotary leaders. They can be political leaders, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, military leaders, community leaders, coaches, friends, neighbors. And servant leaders do most of the things that other leaders do. They articulate a vision, they manage, they communicate, and so on. But what sets them apart is they're focused on others, not just themselves, and they're motivated to make life better for others, not just themselves. And that's a big difference. That difference in focus and motivation is what really distinguishes servant leaders, regardless of their titles, roles, or positions, or whether they have a title, role, or position at all. I see this often in the kinds of questions that people ask when they're making decisions. So when a power-oriented person makes a decision, he or she is likely to ask these kinds of questions. What decision will enhance my power? What decision will make me look good? What decision will help me get ahead of my chief rivals? What decision will position me better for my next promotion? These questions are all power-oriented questions about the person who's making the decision. They're about the leader, how the leader can take advantage of this decision for his or her personal benefit. Of course, service-oriented leaders are different. Servant leaders ask questions like this: what needs should we be addressing? If we address these needs, will we harm anyone? If so, can we mitigate the harm or eliminate it? What decision will be most consistent with the mission, values, and goals of our organization? What decision will best serve our customers? These questions are not about the leader. They're about the organization and the people it serves. And this is where I think the Rotary four-way test fits so well. The questions are not about power, but about how we treat people. Are we truthful with them? Are we being fair to them? Are we building good relationships with them? Are we sharing the benefits? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? So these are questions that servant leaders should and do ask. Because they ask different questions, over time, the power-oriented leader and the servant leader move in different directions. The power-oriented leader moves toward getting what she or he wants personally. The servant leader moves toward getting the things that other people need. And that's a big difference. So I thought I'd stop there for a few minutes and see if there are any questions that you might have or comments that you might want to share.
Kent, we'll ask people just to type their questions into the chat, and then we can maybe ask them to unmute if we need to get more from them. There is a question here. Will we be able to get this slide deck? And I guess the answer will be it will be recorded, but asking about the slide deck specifically.
Sure, I'd be happy to send the slides.
Okay, so I'll get those from Kent and make them available, and we'll let you get those. Just comment here from one of our participants saying spot on, so we're connecting.
Good.
Any other questions for Kent at this point? There we go. Another comment about an excellent presentation. And of course, as Rotary leaders, finding out how we can work with and through people to accomplish the goals of the organization is always a good thing. So Kent, I think we can carry on from here.
Great.
If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll come to them at the end of the presentation. Carry on, Kent.
Terrific, thanks very much. So one of the things about servant leadership, it's an international movement and there's a whole lot of information available. And I'd like to share some of that because there's a lot for us to learn from and draw from in fulfillment of our work as Rotary leaders. Let's start with the workplace. And as I mentioned before, Greenleaf's idea of servant leadership grew out of his experience in a large competitive business. And he concluded that what worked best for the business was servant leadership. Servant leadership principles are today being implemented in business, the public sector, the military, nonprofit organizations. And of course, they're not implemented the same way in every organization. I think if there were two businesses in the same town located across the street from each other, they would implement it differently because each have their own cultures, their organizational histories, their personalities, and so on. But that's fine. They make it work to meet their own culture and their own needs. There are companies in the US that have implemented servant leadership principles. Many have been on the Fortune magazine list of the 100 best companies to work for in America. You may recognize some of them: Starbucks, Southwest Airlines, TD Industries, The Container Store, Aflac, Synovus Financial. We know about these because they have attended servant leadership conferences and given talks and shared some of their practices. One of the companies that I've spent the most time learning about and really impresses me is TD Industries in Dallas, Texas, especially construction company. They got Greenleaf's essay soon after Greenleaf published it. They got copies, they shared them, they adopted servant leadership principles 40 years ago. They have 2,300 employees. They do about $600 million in business every year. They're employee owned and their employees are called partners. Here's a little video clip of Jack Lowe, who was the chairman and CEO of the company at the time.
In the early 1970s, when Greenleaf wrote his first essay, Jack Lowe Sr. got a copy. Lowe was president of Texas Distributors, a company that is today known as TD Industries, a successful air conditioning and specialty construction company headquartered in Dallas. It has been on the Fortune magazine list of the 100 best places to work in America every year since the list was started. Fortune magazine has placed TD Industries in its Hall of Fame. Jack Lowe Jr. succeeded his father as chairman and CEO in the 1980s.
In the early 70s, Dad had come across Greenleaf's first essay, and he shared it with the employees of our company, which we call partners. He brought people together in groups of about 15 for all-day meetings. This wasn't the only thing they discussed, but it was one of them. Mother fixed spaghetti lunch every time for 2 years. They talked about what kind of company we wanted to have, what their values would be, how they wanted to be led, and how they wanted to lead. Out of those conversations, servant leadership became a core part of our company culture. Today, we say that you have to produce the results for which you're responsible in your job, and you also have to be a servant leader. which would mean help those around you grow. You can't be pretty good at both, producing results and being a servant leader. You can't work at TV industry for the long term. We'll help you with both, but you got to be good at both of them. And both are equally important to us.
The early
So that's just one example of an organization that has taken servant leadership seriously and has been very successful financially over the years. About 15 years ago, leadership scholars began to shift from transformational leadership and leader-member exchange to conduct empirically rigorous studies of servant leadership in the workplace. And I'm excited to be alive while this is happening, because it's really very exciting to see what's coming out of the research. So the results have been very positive. For example, research has shown that servant leaders facilitate effective teamwork, and that's certainly important. Servant leaders enhance both job performance and commitment to the organization, and both of those are important. Servant leaders inspire followers to serve the community. That really fits Rotary. Employees of servant leaders are more helping and creative than those working with leaders who score lower on servant leadership. And helping and creative, those are really good things. Servant leadership has been shown to be positively related to employee job satisfaction. And if you've got good employees, you want to keep them. You want them to be satisfied on the job. So those were unit studies or team studies within organizations. And there are a number of those, and they've been going very well. But you stop and you ask yourself, what about the impact of the entire organization? Well, the first study of that I know of was produced in 2012. Dr. Suzanne Peterson and her colleagues went into Silicon Valley and they studied 126 CEOs of technology organizations. They spent a lot of time interviewing them, and after that, they classified them as founders, narcissists, or servant leaders. They found a positive relationship between servant leadership and firm performance. Companies led by servant leaders generated better financial results than companies led by founders or narcissists. The narcissists were the worst. Founders were better, but servant leaders were the best. The researchers said CEOs may potentially improve their firm's performance through more inclusive forms of leadership, such as servant leadership, that take into account a broader number of stakeholders and that are more other focused. Just a couple of examples of some other research. Giolito, Leiden, Van Dierendonk, and Chung published an article on servant leadership influencing store-level profit, the mediating effect of employee flourishing. And they concluded that servant leadership related positively to business unit performance measured by profit growth. They also concluded that servant leadership works for all stakeholders, including shareholders. Dr. Bob Leiden is the scholar who's really led the charge and has encouraged people to do empirical research and has helped bring forth a number of graduate students in the field. His research shows that it's only when the leader is rated highly on servant leadership that followers trust the leader, emulate his or her behavior, and follow through on a desire to reciprocate by engaging in work behaviors that go beyond expectations. When this happens, customers and other stakeholders are happy and financial profits follow. This thing about creating a fair workplace and reciprocal behavior, these organizational citizenship behaviors are essential. People pitch in and help out in ways they don't have to. It's beyond their job description. Here's a wonderful chart. This is a result of research that Dr. Leiden did with 147 small and medium-sized companies in Korea. And it showed that when servant leadership in those organizations went up, the firm's profitability went up as well. So the two axes, the vertical axis is profitability, the horizontal axis is servant leadership. As you increase servant leadership to the right, the profitability curve goes up. So that's a little bit about the workplace. So servant leaders can be effective, their organizations can be successful. There are a lot of things that servant leaders do. I've just picked out a few key practices. I published a book back in 2008 and a new edition in 2012. And I just wanted to argue that, there are specific things servant leaders do. And I picked 7: self-awareness, listening, changing the pyramid, developing your colleagues, coaching, not controlling, unleashing the energy and intelligence of others, and foresight. So I'd like to touch on each of these a little bit. Self-awareness, each of us is the instrument by which we lead. We have our own personalities, backgrounds, strengths, weaknesses, foibles, etc. We are what we have, and we try to lead with who we are. So we need to be aware of the impact that our words and deeds have on others. We need feedback, and we need to take time to reflect on what we see and hear, because we want to impact people in positive ways. So we need to know how we are impacting them. Listening is huge. It's how you link up. It's how you become relevant and successful. To put it simply, how will you know what people need if you don't ask and then listen? So it's the key to understanding the needs of others, which is the first step on the mission to identify and meet the needs of others. One of the most fun and interesting people I've ever met is Dr. Ernesto Ciroli, one of the world's leading consultants on the topic of economic development. He has a consulting firm, and over the years, he and his colleagues have worked with 300 communities. They've helped them to create 40,000 new jobs so far. But he has a wonderful TED Talk in which he explains what happened to him, an early experience he had in Africa. I want to play for you the first 3 minutes, and then I taped a little extra comment that occurs later. The TED Talk, well, I'm being polite. The TED Talk here on this slide says, want to help someone, start by listening. I think the actual title is want to help someone, shut up and listen. Anyway, here's the beginning of his talk.
Everything I do and everything I do professionally, my life has been shaped by 7 years of work as a young man in Africa. From 1971 to 1977, I look young, but I'm not. I worked in Zambia, Kenya, Ivory Coast, Algeria, Somalia, in projects of technical cooperation with African countries. I worked for an Italian NGO, and every single project that we set up in Africa failed. And I was distraught. I thought, age 21, that we Italians were good people and we were doing good work in Africa. Instead, everything we touched, we killed. Our first project, the one that has inspired my first book, Ripples from the Zambezi, was a project where we Italians decided to teach Zambian people how to grow food. So we arrived there with Italian seeds in southern Zambia, in this absolutely magnificent valley, going down to the Zambezi River, and we taught the local people how to grow Italian tomatoes and zucchini. And of course, the local people had absolutely no interest in doing that, so we paid them to come and work, and sometimes they would show up. And we were amazed that the local people in such fertile valley would not have any agriculture. But instead of asking them how come they were not growing anything, we simply said, thank God we're here. Just in the nick of time to save the Zambian people from starvation. And of course, everything in Africa grew beautifully, and we had these magnificent tomatoes. In Italy, a tomato would grow to this size, in Zambia to this size. And we could not believe. And we were telling the Zambians, look how easy agriculture is. When the tomatoes were nice and ripe and red, overnight, some 200 hippos came out from the river and they ate everything. And we said to the Zambians, my God, the hippos. And the Zambia said, yes, that's why we have no agriculture here. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I thought it was only us Italians blundering around Africa, but then I saw what the Americans were doing, what the English were doing, what the French were doing. And after seeing what they were doing, I became quite proud of our project in Zambia, because you see, at least we fed the hippos. I decided when I was 27 years old to only respond to people. And I invented a system called enterprise facilitation, where you never initiate anything, you never motivate anybody, but you become a servant of the local passion, the servant of local people who have a dream to become a better person.
So he'll go into a location, a community, and he'll just ask them, what are your dreams? What do you want to accomplish? And how can I help? So it's very, very inspiring work. And you have to be careful because there are hippos out there. That's why servant leaders don't start with their own knowledge or expertise, their own programs or products or services or procedures. They listen first. What do people want and need? What are their hopes and dreams? And it's only after listening that servant leaders try to help in appropriate ways. And if they cannot, they try to find people who can. I think this is a challenge for many individuals and organizations, which is, you have good intentions, but even with good intentions, there's a danger of doing what you want to do or know how to do, even if that's not what people need you to do. So another key practice is changing the pyramid. In a typical organization, the organizational chart or structure is shaped like a pyramid with the leaders at the top and mid-level managers, and then the larger base at the bottom where people are delivering the programs, products, and services. So it's not surprising that people tend to look up at their bosses in this kind of structure. That's fine. But if everyone's only looking up, who's paying attention to their colleagues and who's looking out at the customer, client, patient, member, citizen, whoever it is that the organization was created to serve? That's important also. So many servant leaders talk about inverting the pyramid. This is kind of a metaphor. So the customer is at the top and the servant leaders are at the bottom looking up at the customer. So they're trying to follow or serve the customer. Ken Blanchard, in his book, Leading at a Higher Level, said the servant leader articulates a vision and then inverts the pyramid and focuses on implementation, on serving others. It's at that point that you want to get the job done, so you help the people who are doing it. Servant leadership has been shown to work in any organization, in any situation, because in identifying and meeting the needs of others and helping people grow are always good practices, no matter what's going on. That's why servant leadership works not only when things are going well, but also when things are going badly. I want to tell you a story about how well it worked when things were going badly. This is a story about the Delphi brake assembly plants. Back in 2006, there were 1,600 employees in the Delphi brake assembly operations in Dayton, Ohio. They were told their operations would close in 2008, 2 years later. It was an irreversible decision because Delphi sold the business. So many of these employees had worked for Delphi and GM for 20, 30 years. Many were angry and frightened. Many had left immediately. The replacements had to be hired and trained. 800 people, I think, had to be replaced. It was a pretty chaotic environment. But the challenge was to build 1 million assemblies of brake components per month in the midst of that chaos. Those brakes had to be of high quality. Obviously, a tremendous safety factor here. And they had to be of high quality and they'd be produced that way every day until the very last day when they went out of business and everyone lost their jobs. Tom Green was the plant manager and Mary Miller was the human resources officer for the brake assembly operations. When this announcement was made, they found out corporate headquarters said there's no ready-made plan to help you deal with this closure of your plant, so good luck. And it turned out to be a good thing because in facing the crisis, they decided to apply servant leadership principles that they'd always wanted to apply. So now they were free to do that. Here's a little video of Mary Miller, the human resources manager.
Servant leadership works when times are tough. An example is the closure of the Delphi brake assembly operations in Dayton, Ohio. The employees were told in 2006 that the plant would close in 2 years. When the announcement was made, many people left, so a new workforce had to be hired and trained. They had to perform at the highest possible levels, knowing that they would all be losing their jobs. Mary Miller was the human resources manager for the Delphi brake assembly operations during the 2-year shutdown process.
We faced so many challenges that it was hard to know what to do. What we did was implement some basic principles of servant leadership. We listened more than we talked. We asked employees what they needed. We set aside time for foresight and planning, and we focused on helping people to grow. We sat down with all our colleagues and developed individual plans that would help them get the experience or training or education that they would need to get their next job. The results were outstanding. We became one of the safest manufacturing operations in America. Our defect rate was single-digit parts per million. Our on-time delivery was 99.5%, and our financial performance was the best it had been in decades. On our last day, when the operations closed, we were the best we had ever been. Servant leadership was the reason.
Sir,
I asked them to write an essay about their experience there, and I was pretty teary-eyed while I was editing it. Just amazing. Think about that phrase. On our last day, we were the best we'd ever been. Amazing situation. But these four principles that they applied: listen, don't talk. Ask employees, what do you need? Set aside time every day for foresight and planning, and ask, do those served grow as persons? I think the individual development plans were really terrific. This is really inspiring. I've actually tried this myself in a couple of organizations. So instead of focusing on the idea that in 2 years you're going to be out of work, they sat down and said, let's figure out how to make the best use of this 2 years so that you have a better chance of getting a good new job. So do you want to complete a college degree? Do you want job rotation to broaden your experience? Do you want new training? I mean, what can we do during this time that will help lift you toward your next job? So they did that with each person, and they wrote down the individual development plans. They monitored them, they implemented them, and they were a key to the plant's success during the last 2 years. I want to repeat what she said. They became one of the safest manufacturing plants in the US. Defects were single-digit parts per million. On-time delivery was 99.5%. And she didn't say this. They saved the US $160 million in operating costs, the most profitable they'd been in decades. And if the business had not been sold, they would have been a profit center for the company. Another key practice: coaching, not controlling. One way to develop people, of course, is by coaching and mentoring. We know that organizations need rules and procedures, but we also know that trying to control people doesn't bring out their best. People can resist. When you want to bring out the best in people, you really have to be involved in engaging them, inspiring them, coaching them, mentoring them, and bringing them along. When an instruction is issued, people need to understand it. They need to be ready to implement it. And that's the result usually of coaching. Another key practice: unleashing the energy and intelligence of others. This really follows the previous two. After developing your colleagues, after coaching your colleagues, they should be ready, and you should be ready to let them use their energy and intelligence to make their highest and best contribution to the organization. They need to be unleashed. People need the experience of being unleashed so they can grow. And in any event, everybody's there, whether it's a for-profit, a nonprofit, public, private sector, volunteer organization, everybody's there. So why not engage everyone to the fullest so they can make their best contribution? You need to unleash. James Autry was a fighter pilot, a poet, and head of a major media corporation, Meredith Corporation. He's published books on servant leadership and on organizations. And I really like the 6 things that he believes about leadership. He said, leadership's not about controlling people. It's about caring for people and being a useful resource for people. Leadership's not about being boss. It's about being present for people and building a community at work. Leadership's not about holding on to territory. It's about letting go of ego, bringing your spirit to work, being your best and most authentic self. Leadership is less concerned with pep talks and more concerned with creating a place in which people can do good work, can find meaning in their work, and can bring their spirits to work. Leadership, like life, is largely a matter of paying attention. Leadership requires love. And one of Autry's books is about how to deal with people who are really difficult and how you treat them with dignity and respect and try to work through their issues. They may need to leave, but it starts with that love. It starts with that care. Finally, the key practice of foresight. Foresight is a better than average guess about what's going to happen when in the future. It's the lead that the leader has. If you don't have foresight, you're not leading, you're not out in front, you're just reacting. So Greenleaf said it's the central ethic of leadership, because a failure of foresight can put an organization in a bad situation that might have been avoided otherwise. Kouzes and Posner have written a number of books. This one's called The Truth About Leadership. Said the capacity to imagine and articulate exciting future possibilities is the defining competence of leaders. Leaders are custodians of the future. They are concerned about tomorrow's world and those who will inherit it. They think beyond what's directly in front of them, peer into the distance, imagine what's over the horizon, and move forward toward a new and compelling future. Having surveyed thousands of people, and they do every year, tens of thousands of people, on what they want in their leaders, in someone they would willingly follow, the quality of being forward-looking is second only to being honest as their most admired leader quality. On average, 70% of respondents selected it. Daniel Kim wrote an essay on foresight. He said, we cannot forecast accurately when something was going to happen. We're not forecasting that on October 19th at 8:33 in the morning, a certain thing is going to happen. But we can perceive the significance and nature of events before they have occurred. He used a metaphor that he borrowed from a planner at Royal Dutch Shell, who said, when it rains in the foothills of the Himalayas, we can't predict exactly when, but we know that the rivers will swell and flood the valleys below. We need to take action to minimize or prevent the damage that the flooding will cause. We need to think it through, prepare, and take advantage of it if we can, but try to prevent harm for sure. Kim said, if we were to exercise foresight, we have to continually expand our awareness and perception. We have to cultivate our ability to see what others do not see. Then we have to share our foresight with others and help them to see what we see, which can be quite a challenge. Once we see it, we need to help others to see it as well. Just a final few things about club leadership. I think servant leadership principles and practices can help Rotarians to implement service above self when they lead. And I'm thinking at home, at work, in the Rotary Club. Rotarians can identify and meet the needs of their club members as well as their local communities and communities in other parts of the world. This is what Rotary does. You can start with self-awareness. What's the impact you're having on other members of your club? You can spend a lot of time listening to your club members in one-on-one conversations, small group discussions, interaction at meetings or surveys, or just watching what people do and listening to what they say. If you're good at listening to your club members, you'll be good at identifying what they'd like to do, their desires, their hopes, their dreams. And that means that you can help club members to fulfill their own desires, hopes, or dreams through club programs and projects that are important to them. Along the way, you can help club members grow as people and as professionals, providing them with opportunities to lead, opportunities they might not have in any other part of their lives, coaching them and then unleashing them when they are ready to make their best contributions to the club and its activities. Growing club members as leaders will lay a strong foundation for the club's future. Again, the field of servant leadership is a rich resource for Rotarians as they lead their clubs and the Rotary movement. There are principles and practices, research, and real-life examples of servant leadership from which we can learn. What we learn can help us not only as Rotarians, but as family members, colleagues at work, and members of our communities. I'd be happy to have comments and questions.
So Kent, if you would, maybe we could stop the screen share and then we'll move to the.
Great.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is just interject here before we go to questions, and we will in fact go to questions, but we have reached the end of our 1 hour, so I want to be respectful of people's time that may not be able to stay with us. And just mention that tonight, as we said earlier, was the launch of our training Fiesta. There will be sessions, as you can see, starting at 6:30 on April the 6th, running right through to April 29th. You can see there's a variety of topics there. And tomorrow, those sessions will all be open for registration, again, through the Rotary district5050.org website, district5050.org. And if you have any trouble with any of those getting registered, you can contact Pat Bond. Or if there's any difficulties or challenges you can't reach her, please reach out to me and we'll get them sorted for you. So again, that is the month long. There are 28 different sessions going on there. You will see that all sessions are either at 6:30 or at 8 p.m. They're scheduled for an hour, but they might go over a few minutes. The one exception to that is that the folks from Club Runner, our communications chair for the district, Dave Duskin, has arranged for the Club Runner folks to come with us And that will be a 4 p.m. Pacific time for Club Runner on the Thursday, the 8th of April. So with that, Kent, we do have a number of questions in the chat box here. So let's get to those right now.
Right.
See what we can do. So there's a question here about an environment where servant leadership is neither recognized nor appreciated, and everybody's willing to take credit for things that other people are doing. And you know, the classic, I want to have the credit. I don't care whether the job gets done. How does one work in that environment?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think it's kind of related to the question of, can you be a servant leader in an organization in which other people, especially the senior leaders, don't want to be servant leaders? I mean, they're using the power model. And my best answer to that is, first of all, just do what servant leaders do. You know, don't give the servant leader lecture. You know, don't march into their office with a banner that says servant leadership is the answer. You just do the things that servant leaders do. You work on listening. You work on growing people. You work on key practices, behaviors, and attitudes. And because those work, because they're effective, people are likely to leave you alone, or maybe they'll drop by and say, hey, you know, it seems like you're doing pretty well here. How come? What's working well for you? And you still don't give the servant leadership lecture. You still just talk about the practices and behaviors. I think it's very hard, but you can create an authentic servant leader type environment within your own team, your own unit, even when it's part of a larger organization that is not servant led.
Thank you. So a Rotary question now. It says many new members come to Rotary with the opportunity to network and hope to build personal business networks in so doing. So how or do we try to teach them servant leadership and at the same time allow them to grow their business relationships with fellow Rotarians? So the juxtaposition of the business piece and the Rotary piece, how do we encourage servant leadership in that case?
I think that's a really nice challenge. And what attracts people, why they join in the first place and why they stay may not be the same thing. And my experience is that if they come in, they want to network, they want to advance their business, that's fine. If you can get them involved in doing the meaningful work of Rotary, I look around the members of my club. Yeah, we know each other. We know what lines of business we're in. But we're there because of the tremendous amount of meaning that we get from community service, locally and internationally. So it may be that people come in with one motivation. It may be they stay with another. And I think the meaning that is offered through Rotary is just a huge thing. And it's not available everywhere. Not everybody has those opportunities in their daily work lives, for example. So I would just try to draw them into the joy of service and model that and be examples of that. I think they'll catch on. I think you'll keep them.
Okay, Kent, so over the years, have you seen some good examples and perhaps the flip side, some bad examples of servant leadership being employed at Rotary clubs?
I've seen examples of it being employed and examples of it not being employed. I don't think I've seen an example of it being employed badly. Okay. I think it's been one or the other.
Okay.
And, you know, and there's not necessarily, you know, bad intentions on the part of people who you know, aren't doing it. We live in a culture that pretty much says leadership is about, you know, acquiring and wielding power. And so people think that's what they're supposed to do. And so, you know, often they behave that way. They don't really know there's an alternative. So no, I've seen one or the other, but I haven't seen people necessarily doing it badly.
Kent, what impact, if any, do you think COVID has had or will have on servant leadership within Rotary and business organizations?
I mean, I don't know. What I would like to see is an understanding of just how precious our communities are, and Rotary is a community. Our clubs are communities. I mean, all of you are a community. How badly we need that, and how hard it's been to maintain that when we can't do it in person. But I think we're designed this way. There's a lot of research on the negative impacts of loneliness And you can be alone and not lonely, but there are people who are lonely, and the antidote is obviously to be with others, to have relationships. So it could be that I mean, what's fascinating to me is the attendance at my Rotary Club went up when we went online. We suddenly realized how much we need each other, and well, okay, partly it's because we meet at 7:15 in the morning, and now you don't have to get up early and drive somewhere to the meeting, but we're paying more attention to each other. I think we've realized how much we enjoy each other and care about each other. So that's one thing I think has been good in the midst of a lot of things that are really hardships.
So Kent, are the terms mentorship and coaching synonyms for servant leadership, or are they elements of servant leadership? How do they relate to servant leadership?
I see them as elements of servant leadership, as one of the key practices. And I don't worry too much about the difference between those words. I usually use coaching in terms of advice on one's daily work, sort of detailed advice about feedback about what you're doing. And mentorship, what comes to my mind most often is about life, about careers, about the meaning of life, about where you're going, big questions, whereas coaching may be more about specific work being done. But they're both good. They're both part of servant leadership.
And just a fun question here. Are you in your own private aviary? Was that birds that we heard in the background?
Well, this is one of the things that happened during COVID for us. We went out and got a bird feeder, not understanding how many wonderful things would start happening to us. So, we've got a lot of birds flying around our house now looking for food.
So are you aware, Ken, of any research specific to servant leadership within Rotary and at the club level? And if so, so there's no research?
There may be, Rod, I'm not aware of it. I think that would be wonderful to have some of that. Most of my work has been generic, sharing information about servant leadership that anybody in any kind of organization could pick up and run with. But every organization is a little different, so it would be fun. And this is something that I think Jerry Hall and I are going to be working on, as to how do you plug servant leadership into Rotary with specific examples. And his background and experience are a real treasure in that regard.
And Dave Duskin is just reminding us that the club visioning exercise, the long range planning exercise, is one of the ways to help encourage servant leadership, because it gives a club plan that's agreed to by the group. And then you as a leader are merely helping the club achieve its goals as opposed to establishing your own. So thank you, Dave, for that comment. Several wonderful and inspiring, outstanding, incredible, really, really warming up to your presentation. So what are the most common errors made on the part of leaders when they're trying to be servant leaders, and particularly within volunteer groups?
Well, the one that I notice most often, it's almost the biggest challenge or the downside of servant leadership, which is it is not a quick fix. If you want to grow up, if you're going to listen to people and you're going to grow people, you need to take the time to do that. And so it's about patience. And we live in a fast moving world, and we want to get things done. We want to get them done fast. But if you're really going to listen, it takes time, and it'll save time later because you'll be relevant. You'll be on target. You won't be wasting your time, but you got to make that investment up front. Same thing with growing people. It may take a while before you really see the results. So I think that's really the biggest challenge and possibly the downside of servant leadership. It works better in the end, but you've got to be patient up front.
So Kent, we've mentioned Jerry Hall a couple of times in this presentation, the past Rotary International Director, Jerry Hall from Reno, and District Governor Carroll was just making a note here. Is there something Jerry might like to add to this in terms of the project that the two of you are working on? Jerry, would you like to unmute and join us on that?
I think I've unmuted, and I think that I'm, you got my video on now, sure. Thank you, Rod, and thank you, Kent, for saying a couple of nice things about me, and I probably didn't deserve that, but Kent and I sort of came together because I put together a training for the Zone Institute that was supposed to be held in November in San Diego, and that kind of rekindled friendship that began 10, 12 years ago. But I think Kent brings a wonderful history of scholarly work and understanding of the servant leadership process. And what we're trying to do is to put together training that could be spread to districts initially across the United States that would focus on servant leadership skills and practices. Kent has the background and knowledge. I'm an amateur at this, but I think there are great things that we can do in that regard. And the question that you ask about how servant leadership might help clubs with membership and fundraising, if you think about the good club presidents that you've seen in your time in Rotary, usually they are the ones that listen. They coach club committee chairs. They know how to do the ask in a polite way, and they constantly work to build up the confidence of the people in the club. So those are excellent practices that a good club president can exercise. And when you think about it, that's what provides the success to our Rotary club. So I'm anxious to continue the work with Kent, and I appreciate you, Rod, letting me sit in tonight to hear Kent again and to see what you guys are doing up in the Northwest there. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jerry, and we appreciate your continued leadership for Rotary. Thank you. So, Kent, there are no, there is one more. Might you want to just speak a little bit about the Paradoxical Commandments and your, do it anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, I was working with student leaders back in the 1960s, and what discouraged me in watching them was that it seemed to me that they gave up too soon because people didn't appreciate what the change they were trying to bring about. And I was trying to teach them that, if you go out and do what you think is right and good and true, that should be meaningful to you, and that should be satisfying and fulfilling. So that should be enough to keep you going. You should be able to do it anyway, as it were. So I wrote a little booklet for them back in 1968, and I included in it these 10 paradoxical commandments, which were meant to be guidelines for finding personal meaning in the face of adversity. So each one starts with a statement that's, irritating or uncomfortable or adverse, but it's followed by the positive commandment to do the right thing anyway, because that's where you'll get the meaning, and the meaning will sustain you. So you can continue to lead, continue to do the right thing. So we just published it in that little booklet, sold 25 or 30,000 copies around the United States. I went on with my life, and 30 years passed, and I didn't know what was happening to the Paradoxical Commandments until I found out that Mother Teresa put a copy up on the wall of her children's home in Calcutta. And that just, that changed my life. I learned that at a Rotary Club, learned it at my Rotary Club. And so I began speaking and writing about the Paradoxical Commandments again. Servant leaders understand that. Servant leaders understand that what they're doing is meaningful. Rotarians understand that, and that intrinsic motivation keeps people going. So yeah, that's been a surprise in my life. They just travel all over the world. They've been used by millions of people, and I'm just grateful to hear from many people about how they've been able to use them over time.
Thank you very much. So I think we've come to the end of the questions in our chat box. And Kent, it's my pleasure to thank you for joining us this evening and launching our training Fiesta. As I said at the beginning, the reason we do this, the why about the learning and development, is so that we have better Rotarians that are better informed, that understand what our organization is all about, and that there is somewhere for them to perform at a high level in meeting the needs of others. Servant leadership is very much a key to that, both at our club level and beyond. And we thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving us your wisdom about servant leadership and how it can be impactful for Rotary.
My thanks to all of you. I really appreciate the opportunity. Bless you. You're doing great work.
Thank you very much, Kent. And with that, we'll bring to a close any formal presentation. I'll get the spotlight off Kent here so he's not front and center.